Forget New Year's resolutions. One word can change your life, and Dan Britton can help you find it. Taking a look at a man in the Bible, God's assurance to Joshua when he didn't finish the job is encouragement for you too, and Joshua Danrich is known as Mr. Fresh, and the reason why is driving him into the Hall of Heroes. Coming up in episode 105 of Manly with Andy. Now join the podcast, Dan Britton. He's written a book called One Word That Will Change Your Life. Dan, before we jump in, let's start with the big question. What do you think is the biggest challenge that men face today, and how do we overcome it?
Well, I think the biggest challenge men face is actually on the back of the book. We actually have a great verse that Paul wrote to the Corinth church, 1 Corinthians 16:13. He kind of summarizes the entire letter, his first letter to the Corinth church, giving some summary, giving some challenges, kind of putting a bow on it. And he simply says this: be alert, stay strong, stay firm in the faith, act like men, and be strong. I mean, he drops the mic on four things. I mean, it is so awesome. And all four of those things are really what our book's about. But I think that's the biggest challenge that men face is really that third one. I mean, he goes through the be alert, have your head on a swivel, be discerning, be decisive. Reminds me of 1 Chronicles 12 when David was gathering the men together to fight, and he gathered all these 20,000 from the tribe of Issachar and all this kind of stuff. And finally, the men of Issachar, 200 of them, the smallest number of all the ones he gathered, he said that the men of Issachar understood the times and knew what to do. And that's about being aware, And so Paul's saying, hey, be aware, men. Be aware, head on a swivel. Stand firm in your faith. Hey, don't waver. Don't be like a little tumbleweed that's banging around. And then the third one is man up. Act like a man. And I think the biggest challenge, Andy, that men face today is they're not acting like men. They're not living with their God-given potentials of what God has created them to do, and that is to be mature. To be mature men of God, to grow up, to act like a man of God, and live like a man of God. And I think that's one of the greatest challenges today that I'm seeing after 35 years in ministry and sports ministry. I mean, if you want to talk about, immaturity and sometimes people's pride and ego get in the way, I've just seen it firsthand day in and day out around the world, is this idea that men need to be all that God's created them to be, and to man up.
Well, and I think, that was kind of the catalyst for me starting this podcast 2 years ago. Was I was seeing what the world was saying, this is what being a man is. And I said, that's not it. That's not it. It's the biblical manhood has just been such a lost thing that even men like you and I trying to achieve biblical manhood, it seems, it really is countercultural. And so it makes it even more difficult, I think, more than ever.
It's like the fish swimming against the stream, right? It takes a little wiggle. Any old dead fish can go with the flow, but it takes a fish with a little wiggle to go upstream. And really, there's a lot of men that are just dead fish going with the stream, and they're not getting that little oomph and being able to go against counterculture and go upstream.
And I think part of that is, and just talking to you, I'm a little more amped up because I see your passion and I hear your passion for men living a biblical life. And I know that's part of your heart behind your devotional. I would love to talk to you about you being in, especially a sports ministry for how many years now?
35.
Wow. 35 years. Incredible. Fellowship of Christian Athletes. I know many people are aware of that organization, but if they're not, just give them a little overview of what you guys do there.
Yeah. I got involved in FCA, Andy, when I was in college at University of Delaware. So I grew up with two older brothers that beat the heck out of me growing up. And I had a dad that was an All-American lacrosse player at the Naval Academy. And so, I grew up with a football, basketball, and lacrosse stick in my crib. Like I didn't have any choice. Just kind of grew up in this very competitive. My mom's favorite saying was take it out on the grass. Something was going to break inside the house. Balls are flying around, wrestling. For me, it was just, part of my DNA. And I really got introduced to Jesus at age 8 through my mom and a Good News Bible Club. And then went away to youth camp at 14 up in New York, Word of Life Bible camp, and surrendered my life to Christ. And then went to University of Delaware, where lacrosse was my passion. That was my one sport. And so, got involved in this little group called the Fellowship of Christian Athletes at University of Delaware. We met in Carpenter Sports Building on Thursday nights at 7 o'clock, room 215. There's 10 athletes, 8 football guys, 1 lacrosse guy, that was me, and 1 swimmer. And felt sorry for her. She was outnumbered. And, it was the 10 of us, and we would circle up. We would grab the Bible, we would, open God's word. We would look at things and how to apply it to the athletic field, to the courts, to the swimming pool. And sure enough, the all week long, I'd see him down the weight room and kind of iron sharpening iron, and just fell in love with this group called the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. And knew, Andy, when I grew up back in Virginia, D.C. area, I didn't have that opportunity. I didn't have a group, a tribe that I could go with. And I was like, graduated my finance degree and had 4 years of playing pro lacrosse, college lacrosse, and actually played pro lacrosse. But when I went back home, just wanted the local schools to have the same thing that I benefited from when I went to University of Delaware. And so called FCA. They said, great, you can go raise your money and come on staff. And I was like, oh, is that the way it works? So I raised my money and formed a board and came on part-time. I was playing pro lacrosse on the side. And anyways, that was in 1990. And, fast forward, really saw God do supernatural things, and worked as a local director, went to a regional director. Then in 2002, moved from DC to Kansas City to the home office, and served there in a lot of different roles. Then I was asked to take FCA from one country to international. And so we did that. We had a 10-year overnight success of going from one country to 116 countries. And you really had a front row seat of helping lead that. And really, even through all that, this past August, God called at my heart and just said, Dan, you've been saying you have 2 passions, sports and Jesus, put them together, you got FCA. But really, there's this leadership development piece that you're passionate about. There's leadership, investing in men and women of God to be leaders of leaders. And so really, God called me away from FCA in August to start my own sports ministry called Sports Life Leadership. And so I'm on a new adventure that combines my 3 passions, which is Jesus, sports, and leadership, and kind of put that together. It's Sports Life Leadership. And our goal is to infuse life into the world of sports, one leader at a time. And we do that through world-class Christ-centered training resources and programs. So I'm super jazzed about what that means and kind of springboarding at this stage of my life.
I love that. And I've always been curious about this. And since you've been on the front lines for years, why do you think it is, of all celebrities in any sort of realm, why does it seem like there's more athletes that are Christ-focused and Christ-centered and Jesus first than in any other celebrity realm?
And I would even take it a step further if you really want to analyze it. Why are some sports more Christian-focused than other ones, right? That's, I would say lacrosse is I grew up in lacrosse my entire life, and it's a godless sport. It's just it's like I was the only Christian on my college team out of 45 guys. I was the only Christian on my pro team out of 25 guys. I always felt like I was a lone ranger. But, when I played football, we would have prayers before games. We would, have chapel services, all this kind of stuff. It's weird. Okay, we're playing sports. We're in America. One sport is accepted, another sport it's not. And, that's always intrigued me. But, I think, in regards to high level and all the things that are experienced, I would say that this is my understanding after 35 years in sports ministry. I think it's because the discipline, it's this disciplined mindset of sharpening the saw mindset, right? That it's they understand what it means to train and to condition. And so if you're already doing that, and I'm not saying the other areas of professionalism or other areas of celebrities, they don't have that, because they have to reach a level that's incredible in the top 1%. But I think what I've seen is this, in this world of sports, it's okay, how can I train my mind? How can I train my body? Well, I mean, if you talk about your mind and body, how can you not talk about the heart? How can you not figure out like there's a spiritual dimension? And so I think it just lends itself a little bit more open. It kind of like falls onto the table with athletes and coaches that go, man, we're talking about having, the competitive mindset. We're talking about training our bodies. Well, that's two of the dimensions. We got body and mind. What about the spirit? What about the heart? And so I think that just allows it to be a natural, like, hey, are you going to do anything as an athlete to hit that third dimension? Or are you just going to push it to the side? Where I don't think in other areas of celebrity and other professions, people go, oh, look, I'm already investing my entire life in these two dimensions. I'm leaving a third dimension out. So that would be my take on it.
So you wrote this devotional, Daily Wisdom for Men, with your co-author Jimmy Page, and I know that you guys have had a really long friendship. So one thing that I've had a lot of conversations with guys on the podcast is men and being lonely, and I think a lot of that comes from men either don't know how to make friends when we get older, or they don't know how to keep friends. And I know your friendship with Jimmy's been you've had it for a long time.
Yeah, it's been 35 years that
Wow.
we've had friends. Andy, I think it's true. I say that, we wrote our very first book that Jimmy and I wrote together is Wisdom Walks. And Wisdom Walks is a biblical model of getting the right relationships in your life. We actually have one of a couple of devotions in the Daily Wisdom for Men about it. And really creating your dream team. Your dream team is that biblical model of having a watchman. We call it a watchman, and that's a Paul in your life that's investing in you. It's having a Timothy. We call that a workman, that, hey, you're investing in someone that's a student underneath you. And then you have a couple Barnabases next to you, and we call those warriors. So you got a watchman, you got a workman, you got a couple warriors that you're doing life with. And then you're in the middle of the circle. We kind of draw that out in this Wisdom Walks concept, is a discipleship model, is that you're the walker. So as a walker, pursuer of Christ, so what's your relationship with Jesus? That's you in the middle of the circle. Hey, you got a watchman above you that's on the watchtower seeing a season different than you that can invest in you. Hey, you're the watchman to someone, so you got a worker that's below you you're investing in. And then those two warriors. What we're talking about right now, Andy, is do you have a warrior or two in your life? Do you have an iron sharpening iron? And, I love that verse in Proverbs because I think sometimes we dull people, we don't sharpen people. I like to see the verse that says, hey, iron dulls iron. Well, I think some friends dull each friends, like I think a lot of times in the church, we dull each other. We just wear each other out. We're not sharpening. We're not helping them get them better. And so, I call it the 3 a.m. friend. Who's your 3 a.m. friend, the one that can show up? You call them, they'll be on your doorstep at 3 a.m. And they would come and whatever it take. Or you're that 3 a.m. friend that you're willing to, who are you? People go all the time like, hey, who's your 3 a.m. friend? Who's willing to come and bail you out? And I always go, flip it around. Who's going to be calling you at 3 a.m.? Are you going to be willing to go? What are those people in your life that are even outside your family? And again, I almost say your family doesn't count. Your spouse doesn't count. I mean, yes, they count, but when we're talking about a warrior or two, we're not talking about a spouse. We're talking about another man of God that's sharpening you, that's developing. And that's what Jimmy is. Jimmy, for 35 years, we've been in the book, we've been accountability, we've cried together, we've wept together, we've celebrated together, we've served together, we've been on staff together, we've done ministry together, we've played together, we've had fun together, we've done adventures together. But at the end of the day, if I called him at 3 a.m., he'd show up. And, that's the kind of friends that men need to have. And, early on, we called it the 4 horsemen. We had these 2 other guys, John and Scott, and the 4 of us committed. And this is where it got forged. That's the thing is, Jimmy and I just didn't suddenly like bump into each other. It's like, oh my gosh, we're going to have a 35-year relationship. It was early on, early 90s, right when accountability was kind of like a brand new world in the church world. And we go, okay, let's do this. So every Friday we met at 6:30 a.m. for 2 hours, 3-4 pots of coffee. We met in my garage apartment. I was just coming on staff with FCA, ministry guy. And we would meet and we would Hey, if you didn't read every day and do devotions, a little legalistic, we put $5 in the jar. Hey, if you use foul language, $5 in the jar. If you looked at something that was inappropriate, $5 in the jar. And, the jar filled up with a lot of $5. But the thing is, that was the best way we knew in the early 90s as brand new in our faith, as being married, of sharpening each other. And through that relationship, we called ourselves the Four Horsemen. Any good accountability groups has to have its own name. And so John, Jimmy, and Scott and I literally formed that relationship, that circle of trust. And I was on the phone this morning with John, who now lives in Atlanta. And you know what? He was investing in me. I was on the phone with Jimmy yesterday. He was investing in me. I was texting last week, Scott. But this 35 years in the making, that any of those guys call at 3 a.m., I'm there. If I need their help, they would show up. And that's what kind of friend Jimmy is.
So let's jump into the devotional a little bit. It's a daily devotional for men. And again, I love it because it's, it's one page. So as a guy, I can always make excuses. I don't have time to do this. We all have time to do this. And maybe talk about that a little bit, Dan, because I know you come from the athlete world and you were just talking about discipline. And sometimes when we're not at that high level of being an athlete, we don't have the discipline. So, how do we build up the discipline to even do, to say, all right, I'm going to read this every day. I'm going to open up one page of Daily Wisdom for Men and read it.
If you're a fast reader, it could take less than 60 seconds, right? Mm-hmm. If you want to meditate it and do the prayer and kind of, spend some, like this morning, I read a great one on competition and had a chance to underline it. And it's great. I'm reading it every day like it's fresh. Like sometimes I'm like, did Jimmy write that or did I write that? That's what happens after 35 years, right?
Yeah.
35 years, I'm like, I'm going to have to ask Jimmy, I think that might have been mine. I'm not sure. I know we both kind of write, anyway, so that's the fun part. But like this morning, I read about competition, that, the word competition is not really about crushing someone and beating someone down, but C-O-N, calm is with. It's actually a different definition of competition, is like coming alongside of someone and actually elevating the performance. Like it's a whole different mindset that, yes, competition can make us better, but it's the idea of not crushing and killing and destroying and pulverizing your opponent, but you're playing so well, actually you're helping elevate them. You're bringing them to a higher level. So this morning I was like literally underlining, highlighting, and spending time in it, and it was my own devotion. And it just, again, I would say, my dad passed away in 2008. He was my spiritual mentor. He was a godly man, best friend, battled with leukemia. But he would say there's 3 Ds of devotion, Andy, 3 Ds. First, it starts out as drudgery. It's like eating bark. I just do it. I know it's good for me, but it doesn't taste good, and I know it's good to spend time in God's word. I'm not really benefiting from it. It might be like literally eating bark. Starts out as drudgery. And he would go, Danny, that's what he used to call me as a boy. Danny, if you do it long enough, the drudgery turns into a discipline. Just overnight, that drudgery, like I have to do it versus I get to do it. I get to do it. And that turns into a discipline. It's the way you are. It's the way you're designed, how God's wired you. It's just a routine of, it actually moves in from a drudgery into a discipline. Okay, that's every morning. That's what I do. It's just what I do before I eat breakfast. Bible before breakfast. That's what I do. And then suddenly my dad would get a big smile on his face. But then he goes, then Danny, that discipline turns into a delight. And that delight is when you long. It's not that you have to. It's not even you get to. It's you long to spend time at the feet of the Savior. And, some days it is like drudgery. Still, even today, after serving Jesus for 35 years in ministry and walking with Jesus for 50 years, some days it is drudgery. Some days it is a discipline. But I tell you what, those days that it's a delight, man, when I get a chance to meet with God, it turns everything. And I would say this, Andy, I think a big paradigm shift for me is when I realized that God longs to spend time with me more than I long to spend time with him. Like I know that, like, I have a grandchild. I have 3 grown kids. Again, I got 2 grandchildren, a great granddaughter and grandson, Jesse and Juniper. And I think I long to spend time with Juniper and Jesse more than at their age right now, they long to spend time with me. And I believe the same thing, that the God of the universe craves and longs and can't wait. Almost to the point like, oh my gosh, Dan's almost up. He's almost up. He's going to come downstairs. He's going to sit at the desk. And I finally get a chance to meet with him. Oh my gosh, I can't wait to commune with him, to impart, to put wisdom into him. I can't wait to spend time with a man of God, to train him, to equip him, to get him ready for the day. You know what I do? I'm too busy. Hey, God, why don't you just hang out on my desk? Like, I know you want to meet with me. Hey, you just hold on just a minute. I might have time tomorrow. But hey, I got an appointment. I got up late. Hey, I got to get breakfast. Hey, why don't you just pause, get in the parking lot, I'll come back later. And that mindset, that when I come down my stairs, I already anticipate that my Heavenly Father is sitting there and longing to spend time with me. It moves it from a drudgery to a discipline to, oh my gosh, I'm like a little kid running down the stairs wanting to open Christmas gifts. I can't wait to spend time with my Heavenly Father. And my flesh and my heart cry out for the living God, as David says in Psalms. And that just changes my mindset. And I have to change my mindset to know that I want to move from drudgery to discipline to delight.
Now taking a look at the Bible in Joshua 13, starting in verse 1. When Joshua was an old man, the Lord said to him, "You are growing old, and much land remains to be conquered. This is the territory that remains: all the regions of the Philistines and the Jeshurites, the larger territory of the Canaanites. It includes the territory of the 5 Philistine rulers of Gaza, Ashdod, Ashkelon, Gath, and Ekron, the land of the Avites in the south. In the north, the land of Canaanites, including Merah, stretching northward to Aphek, the border of Amorites, the land of the Gebalites, and the Lebanon mountain area to the east, and all the hill country from Lebanon to Mishrepoth-Maim, including all the land of the Sidonians." So there was more there. I skipped it, though, because it was just a bunch of names that I couldn't pronounce and you wouldn't really understand either. But then it goes to say in verse 6, "I myself will drive these people out of the land ahead of the Israelites. So be sure to give this land to Israel as a special possession, just as I have commanded you. Include all this territory as Israel's possession when you divide this land among the 9 tribes and the half-tribe of Manasseh." So here's a scene that we can relate to, getting older. Joshua is old, and he's been through some battles, leading Israel to victory after victory, but then God drops a reality check saying, hey, you're growing old, and much land needs to be conquered. Now let's pause there. Joshua had accomplished a lot. Led Israel into the promised land, defeated countless enemies, followed God faithfully. But even he, even with his strength and faith, couldn't do it all. There's still land left unconquered, and Joshua simply won't have the time or energy to finish the job. So what does God say? "I myself will drive these people out of the land ahead of the Israelites." God essentially tells Joshua, you've done your part, now let me handle the rest. So you can let yourself off the hook too, that you can't do it all. That's okay. Whether work, family, in our personal goals, there's always going to be more left to do. But just like with Joshua, God reminds us that he's got it covered too. Now entering the Hall of Heroes, Joshua Danrich, who at just 10 years old, Joshua boldly asked his mother, a business consultant, if he could start a luxury car dealership. When the answer was a firm no, Joshua didn't give up. Pivoting with a youthful ingenuity, he instead proposed launching a luxury car air freshener business. With his mother's guidance and his entrepreneurial spirit, Mr. Fresh was born. Together, the mother-son duo worked tirelessly, researching formulas, designing logos, and hitting outdoor markets to sell their bold and bright products. And Joshua, even though shy at first, learned to step into the spotlight himself, charming customers and sharing his story, becoming an inspiration for all who met him. Then, the pandemic threatened to stop everything, but when his face-to-face sales dried up, Joshua didn't flinch. He expanded past the farmers markets in his neighborhood, pitching his way to major retail stores in his community, all before turning 13. And through it all, Joshua has been giving back to his community, donating supplies to healthcare workers, and using FRESH as an acronym for Faith to Rescue Every Son from Hurt. So because Joshua Danrich turned a childhood dream into a thriving enterprise and used his success to inspire and uplift others, he's officially in the Manly with Andy Hall of Heroes. In a world that is against your faith more than ever, Patrick Miller wants to help you choose Jesus over culture. If you need a faith boost, I've got a great example of God keeping his promises in the Bible, and Anthony Simone's 80-year quest is marching him into the Hall of Heroes. All coming up next week on Manly with Andy.